Welcome, everybody. You're listening to the Getting Smart podcast, and I am Nate McClennen, your host today. I've been long convinced that one of the challenges with our Carnegie structured system is that we have these courses, they're tied to credits, tied to graduation, and tied to buildings. Everything is tied together. And so this locks learners over the last 150 years into this prescribed journey with sometimes a choice of learning experience around course selection when they're in high school, for example. Sometimes you have innovative teachers that are doing selection inside the classroom, and maybe school selection if there are other choices in the area, whether it's magnet or private or public charter, et cetera, et cetera. However, at Getting Smart, we're continuing to advocate for unbundled systems that break up all the learning into different pieces, and then the learners with their families are allowed to figure out how to restack those in partnership with whatever the learning organizations are in their area to best meet the needs of every student. And so they will still be meeting expected outcomes if they're in the public system, but how they do it and the journey that they take will be variable for every student, ideally to increase engagement, outcomes, relevance, and ultimately the purpose of learning. But as we know, this is really hard to do in the existing system. And so within our own learning innovation framework, we have every learning organization has a learning model, how learning is structured. And then we also talk about the learning ecosystem, where learning happens. And these are two of these five core elements for us, this model and the ecosystem. So today, I'm really excited to be joined by Matt Bowman, who has built a learning environment at the sort of the furthest transformational edge of both model and ecosystem, where learning happens and how learning happens. Matt's the co-founder of OpenEd, which was formerly MyTech High, and has just released a great book about journey called Open Education, How to Reimagine Learning, Ignite Curiosity, and Prepare Your Kids for Success. So given that the world of educational choice is increasing rapidly in some states, it's a really great time to talk to Matt about how unbundled learning has happened for many years in his organization, and it is operated outside of these systems that have recently been implemented via legislative changes. And so my hope is that we see how possible innovations in learning are and how personalized learning is possible for every single student. So Matt, welcome. We talk a lot, but great to see you again and happy to have you on the pod. My favorite question always is most memorable learning experience when you were a student, meaning you learned the most and you were the most engaged.
Well, I think one of the things that comes to mind is when I was in high school, our friends would always make movies about the books that we were assigned to read. And I think that was one of the greatest experiences I had, was to just use our creativity to come up with characters and settings and cuts and music and edits. We learned way more making movies about the book than we ever did reading the book. And so I think that's an example that has always stuck with me, that, and I still have copies of those. And we sometimes get together and laugh at what we built as, 15-year-olds. But it was super powerful to have some alternative medium to push our creativity to create something that was a different version of what we were assigned. And that was super fun.
So did the teacher give you the choice, or did the teacher say, okay, you all are making movies about the books, or how did that come about in that setting?
I think, knowing us, it was probably, we asked permission. We said, hey, instead of a book report, can we go make a movie?
Right.
And we probably, lobbied enough that we got the permission to do a movie. So, that was back in the 80s. So it was super fun to have our teachers say yes.
That's awesome. I think in a previous podcast, I talked about this, but that one of my memorable moments from high school was doing a movie on mitosis and meiosis and cell division. And we all were acting it out in my friend's driveway. We were different parts of the cell, the different organelles. And I have a very vivid memory. There is no record of it. I don't know where it is. So I'm envious that you have a record of those, because I would really like to see those videos. So,
and disappearing people, we would press pause, run off the screen, press pause, so we were high tech.
That is awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, let's talk about, so you've had a really interesting career. You started in education, went into technology, then came back to education to combine technology and ed together. You started in Washington State, I think, right out of college. So what did you teach? And I think most importantly, I love reflecting on our early years of teaching. What did you learn in those first couple of years as you jumped into education?
Yeah, I've reflected a lot on that as I look back at, I started teaching sixth grade in 1994. And so I was in a classroom up in Washington. I was assigned to a portable in the back. So I was all by myself teaching this group of 35 sixth graders. And it was at the start just chaos. Like, the brand new teacher coming in, I had all these ideals of what I wanted. And I was really looking back, trying to implement an open education framework. Like, I look at what I was trying to accomplish then, and it matches what we're trying to do now, which is give kids resources and inspire them to pursue something and learn something that they're interested in. And, all within the framework of curriculum requirements or whatever. But we did a lot of project-based learning. And I'll never forget that, I had everyone was used to checking out their textbooks on the first day of school and getting their little stack of all their textbooks with their names in it and
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
numbers. And I said, we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave the book. The textbooks are on the shelf and you can get them anytime you want. The open resources, right? And later that day, this little 11-year-old boy comes up and he says, I really would like to have one of those books sitting in my desk. Can I just go get one and have it sit in my desk? And I was like, okay, I guess every child's different. And
Right,
that was
right.
kind of the beginning of Matt Bowman might think something is great and exciting, but this one student wanted a set of books just in his desk that he didn't have to worry that someone else was borrowing. They were kind of his domain for a time. And I thought that was really powerful, that I learned that we really need to be adaptable to different learning styles. We then, as a district, moved our sixth graders up to a 6-7 school, right? This was again
Yeah.
in mid-90s, trying to innovate around, the young learner. The middle school child is much different than the young high schooler or the older elementary. Like there was always like this
Yep, yep.
forgotten child, 10 to 14-year-old. And so we did a lot of research. We opened up a 6-7 school, and we were the most innovative, team teaching you could think of. We were doing all kinds of integrated projects and everything. And then one of our teachers left and was replaced by a teacher in his 36th year of teaching science. And he kind of just said, nah, I'm not going to do all that integrated stuff. I'm just going to teach my textbook model, open up the page, do the worksheets, that kind of thing. And we were initially just so concerned that he was not on board with this integrated learning model. And on there, again, never forget, a good number of kids over the year would say, that's my favorite class, that science class.
Yeah.
Because I could just go and I could just sit down and I can turn the page and I know the chapter and the things that I'm supposed to do. Whereas all these other classes have all these projects and open-endedness and,
Right.
a little bit intimidating. And so again, every child's different. So we can't, even if I love integrated interdisciplinary project-based learning, that might not be the right fit for every child. So I can't impose that. I need to listen to what the child is wanting, hearing, doing, succeeding at, and adapt. It's not just, this cool thing I force on kids.
Right, right. Yeah, it's so interesting. We're in our world as well, getting smart. As you know, we push this idea of what do transformational models look like? How do you get to more real world experiences and competency based and personalized, and all those things make sense in terms of the learning sciences in general. But yet
Right.
there are times when students want a more traditional system and they want a more traditional approach. And if they're getting the outcomes that are expected, that they said, or whatever the case may be, then that's okay. It should be variable, right? Sometimes I love just reading a book and learning. Sometimes I love just watching a video, and sometimes I need to do it active and hands-on. And being able to sort of pick and choose is interesting. Unfortunately, our schools, they don't do that very well because they choose a model, right? And so that gets
Right.
to, that was 30 years ago, and now you're in this thing called open ed. You've been on tons of podcasts as you've been talking about your book and talking about your journey. How do you describe the journey? Because it is what we just were talking about. It's how do you personalize for every kid? So talk about the journey to open ed.
Yeah, a couple key points. One is exactly what you were saying. We often get caught up in these labels of, are you a public school student or a district kid or a charter school kid or a private school student or an online or virtual or homeschool or micro school or magnet school, whatever, right? There's all these labels that we sometimes think apply, but in reality, it's all of the above. And that's what open education is really advocating for, is we're not saying do traditional public ed or only do homeschool or micro school or private school. We're just saying, you know what? Tap into everything. Mix and match the right model that fits for your children and your family's needs and interests, and just tap into what works. And if one model works really well, go all in for it until it doesn't. And then, realize that you can pivot and enhance and enrich other things around that. So that's kind of the big message around open education, is simply tap into everything. Don't let yourself be confined by a bucket or a label. And that's really liberating to families to feel like they have that choice. Even if one particular model is the one that works well, run with it. But if it doesn't work for child number 2 or 3 or 4, switch. And that leads to the other kind of premise of open ed. Was my wife and I were raising 5 children, and they were all in the same household with same rules, the same expectations, the same family dinners and cadence and job charts and whatever, right? And we thought they'd all be about the same because they were all in the same household. But it turns out all 5 are different. Each one of them learns different, acts different, different personality, different interests. And so my wife and I turned to each other and said, well, if all 5 of the kids are so different, I imagine their education journey needs to be a little bit different too. And then we started realizing, I guess our family is probably not unique in that. And looking at the system wide, realizing that every family has unique children. And how can we expect one system to serve them all? You can't. And so
Right.
then I do, as being a public school teacher by trade, I wanted to bring the public school system into that journey. So many of the conversations, as you know, in the open education movement kind of exclude public ed. They kind
Right.
of
Right.
say, oh, you're a lost cause. We really need to just leave you behind and build something new. And I kind of said, no, I don't subscribe to that. I think public ed has so many resources available to bring to the family. Let's incorporate public ed inside this movement of personalized education, open education. And so that's really where Open Ed, the company, started now 17 years ago, if you can believe that, Nate.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
we've been
gosh.
running for this is our 17th year, and we partner with public schools, both districts and charter schools across the country, to serve families who want an a la carte model at their fingertips and don't know how to pull that off by themselves. So that's really the value that we bring to families, is helping families tap into all these resources, at the same time helping the public school see how they can serve a family in a very a la carte model. Public schools weren't designed to think that way. Administrators weren't trained to do that. So they need someone like us to help them bridge that world between a very standardized, test-driven approach to a more flexible, personalized approach. And we just help bridge that between families and districts. And it's been a phenomenal ride.
That's really interesting, and I really appreciate sort of the focus of that. 95% of the students in the country are in public sector in some form or another. So we have to be able to play in that space, right?
Correct.
And so tell me a little bit about the students. Are they students that are already in the district or a mix? What does it look like across your enrollees?
Almost 100%, they're new to the district. So they're either homeschooling inside that district, or they're homeschooling or micro schooling or private schooling somewhere else in the state. And
Right.
we enroll them virtually or remotely in that partner district. And so for the most part, it's not the ones who are already attending the local school. The families have made the choice already to enroll in that district, and that's great. For the families who have opted out of the system, we go find them and say, hey, what can we do to bring you back into the public system and serve you with resources, teachers, technology, personalized curriculum, resources that you might not have trying to a la carte on your own. And so that's what we do, is find families around the state who want that support, that structure, that help, and bring them remotely as enrolled students into that district.
Right, right. So in some ways, it's the model is the learning model is different, but the structural model is no different than, say, a district that offers a statewide online school, right? So they're pulling
Right.
students from around the state, and they may be students that are not enrolled elsewhere, but they jump onto an online program that either the district creates or they market it out to another organization. So, all right,
Yep.
so we understand the school, the model itself. I have a family. I've got a couple kids. They enroll in open ed. What does that experience look like? I mean, is there a central platform that they're using? How does assessment happen? What does that look like?
Yeah. So the first step is they just sign on to our platform. And we've created kind of the world's most rich personalized education platform you can imagine. So it's helping families start with, what do I want to accomplish this year? What are the goals of the family? What are the needs of the family? What are the interests and resources available to the family and the child? And then just map out kind of a learning journey for the year. And we have staff, we have certified teachers in every state we operate. We have parent ambassadors that meet with families. We have tutors and support. So we have this extensive network of people available to help each family become the education designer. That's really what we call
Mm.
those parents, is work with us at unlimited resources available to you to design an education plan for your child that meets your needs, meets the district's needs that we partner with, and most importantly, meets the needs of that student. So that's how it works. And then in our platform, we've partnered with a ton of really high quality curriculum that we've already vetted and found works well. And we've added them to our platform so parents can just pick and choose directly inside of our platform access to providers that the parent wants directly. Or they can go out and find on their own, submit it for approval, and then they can get approved to go get reimbursed for it. So those are kind of the two pathways. They can choose stuff directly, and we can ship it to them or email it to them or drop ship if it's books, and they can get whatever they want, or they can go out and find their own, get it approved, and submit it for reimbursement.
So
So,
really thinking about where I opened
yep,
with about learning ecosystems, you basically have a marketplace that you've
yep.
partnered with a bunch of different providers, and the family themselves have a learning ecosystem around that they could tap into and get reimbursed for. How do you, because you're working in the public system, how do you make the connection to the required standards? How specific do you need to be? Like, what does that look like in terms of the accountability side of this?
Yeah, in terms of the accountability side, we have providers that are available to everybody, regardless of you selecting as an additional enrichment resource. So we have those providers that map to the state standards and meet
Yeah.
that accountability requirement, that students have unlimited access to curriculum that maps to those requirements. And then they have certified teachers and licensed teachers in that state that help them ensure that they're meeting the objectives that they want to meet. And then we have state testing as a requirement in most states, unless you opt out.
Yep.
So we have state testing that the students need to go through, and we facilitate that virtually, or if required, physically. We rent sites around the state where students will go take the tests.
Yeah, got it. So, and then are you running it in a competency-based way or not? Like, because I know you and I have talked before around competency-based and what that looks like, and I think I've seen some earlier versions of your platform where it has that. Is that associated with open ed now or not?
Yeah, so we had a couple of layers of that. First, we partner with Southern New Hampshire University's competency-based early college program. So those who want to pursue early college can start as early as ninth grade in our program and go through the competency-based program through SNHU.
Okay.
And that, Nate, is still the world's only. Like, I've looked at every college model out there. SNHU CBE is the only one that does it to the 10th degree. Everyone dabbles around the edges at, I'd say level 1 or 2. SNHU CBE went all in. They're interdisciplinary, project-based, and mastered or not yet, with blind graders, so they don't even know the age of the kids. So
Yeah.
our kids' projects are being evaluated against their average student, which is like a 24-year-old
Right. Right.
working professional, right? So, and SNHU continuously says our students are off the charts faster and better at getting to mastery than the working professionals. So I think that's super cool on that competency side. And we've kind of adopted what SNHU CBE did in terms of bastard or not yet. We really, in the structured system of a Carnegie unit, we have to label that pass fail.
Right.
It's still to us pass or not yet. Right.
Right.
We want to give kids the opportunities to continuously learn from what they want to learn. And if they have gaps in their knowledge, let's feed that with more resources and support and help. So it's that model, but on a transcript, it really is just, for the most part, pass fail, unless they're choosing a curriculum provider that issues letter grades. Then we can pass that forward onto the district's transcript system, and they'll have a transcript with letter grades. But for most, it's just a 0 GPA, pass fail transcript. And families are totally good with that, because colleges and employers and whatever really don't care much about it. They all have pathways to get a job or get into college without having a formal transcript. And that's been the last 10 years has really changed a lot in higher ed around that. And so families have really been able to have the freedom of personalized education without kind of that constraints of a formal transcript.
Right. Yeah. No, we're definitely seeing more and more flexibility, and we're seeing more and more talk about digital wallets and how do you capture something way beyond a transcript that can link into the professional world or the higher education world. So I think it is coming, and I think technology is going to help us make that easier. So just one more question along the logistics of it. So if are the families and students, are they choosing courses, or are they choosing units within the course, or how are they mixing and matching? And then do you have to translate that into, the student passed sixth grade English, or are they choosing sixth grade English and then choosing a set of curricula that are associated with that? What's the order of operations for a family?
Yeah, they're choosing the curriculum provider is usually they're choosing courses that they want to take for the year. And then that course appears on their district transcript as math, English 10th grade or whatever.
Right.
And then you can tailor it underneath there and add more curriculum options, or, go out in the community and get resources there to kind of mix and match into that English 10 slot.
Right. Building the broader learning ecosystem along the way. Yeah.
Yep.
So is the goal to then, it feels like you're in, how many states? 10 to 12 states now?
Yeah. Our team we've grown from like 2 to 10 just this year.
So is ultimately trying to get to all 50 states, so every student has the option and family has the option of this in the country? Is that the long-term strategy for you all?
Yes, with the note is that some states just truly aren't even opening up education at all yet. So, some states still have such closed enrollment laws and closed choice laws, and are kind of doubling down against it. So, maybe 50 might be too grander goal, but definitely, I see 35 to 40 states that are definitely on the potential that we can reach, in the next few years.
And how does that align with, as we both know, there's a lot of ESA work going on, about 20 plus states now. Is this intersecting with it? Is it a play against, not a play against it, but is it a way to say, hey, public schools, you can actually play in this game as well and start offering these more a la carte type experiences that families want without them removing themselves and taking money from the ESA perspective? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, we've looked at that and analyzed that and workshopped that, for a couple of years now, ever since the big wave of 23 for the ESAs. And we definitely see it as it's both.
Yeah.
Is this idea that open education is not just one or the other bucket. And so in states that, have an ESA, typically there's some enrollment cap of an ESA or funding cap.
Right.
So invariably, kids who want it can't get it. And so even Texas, $1 billion ESA still won't serve all the demand. Right. And so it's we participate in both. In states that have ESAs, we run our district model, and we also have a private accredited online school that is approved and participates in the ESA side.
Ah, I see. I see. So you can do both. It's a both and type situation. Yeah, gotcha. Is the private school, is that a newer program of open ed, or is that in response to the ESA world?
It's a response to the ESA world. Just launched this. Our first cohort is started a week ago.
Got it. Is that also called open ed, or does it have another name?
We launched Open Ed Academy as a online private school to serve in the ESA markets, adopting the same mentality that our Open Ed program has run for 17
Right.
years, which is embrace what kids are already doing in the market, in the community, in their homes. See if our teachers and accreditors can grant credit for that towards a accredited diploma if that's what the family wants. And really, it's mixing all those worlds together. And we really are excited about this. The price is as low as you can imagine. It's $2,900 per year for
Wow.
accredited private school for K-8. And then it goes up to, I think, like $3,500 for high school. And even for our early college program, it's only $5,000 a year. And you can get your associate and bachelor's degree if you want
Right,
for
right,
that
right.
big
Super low
price.
cost. Yeah. Well, that should open up a lot of options for people. I love the idea that you're playing in both sectors, public and private. So let's talk about like the type of families and type of learners that enroll. Is this, are you, you've had probably hundreds of thousands. I mean, how many students have you had gone through the program so far?
So our total now.
Right. So you have 100. So you've got a pretty big sample to play with. Is there a certain type of student or families? Like what are the families as they start to approach this? What are the steps that they can take to think about this? I'm trying to understand if this is for everybody, or is this just for some that really want this kind of open experience?
I'd say it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is to just say it's okay if
Yeah.
your local school, like we started the conversation with, there's students in my class that didn't want the open education, pursue your own path model. They wanted a very structured, very, predictable. And if your child is happy at school, happy going to the local district school, like by all means, keep doing it. Like this is not trying to guilt someone into saying you're a bad parent if you choose one path or the other. That's the opposite of what we want to do. We want you to just be intentional about that choice. And once you make that choice, go for it. And if it needs to change in, semester or a year, evaluate it then. But we definitely want to say open education, the concept is for everybody, because whether
Right.
your child is going to a school all day long, 180 days, you still have nights and weekends and
Yeah.
summers that you
Yeah.
want to engage with them on. So that's where we say tap into a dance class or a piano lesson or a ski pass, or, finding something that supplements what you're already doing. That mentality and mindset is for everybody. But in terms of adapting, the whole year's program, families need to make a commitment. You need to decide, is this a priority for one parent to stay home? If not, do I need to hire a teacher to come
Yeah.
by 3 days a week? Is that, it's really comes down to what we like to say is identify your needs and
Yeah.
see what resources you have, and then rate those resources from zero cost to expensive. And then
Hmm.
once and just realize there are a lot of zero cost resources
Right.
and high quality resources that you can get and access from the public library or YouTube or Khan Academy or whatever. Start with free, and then just add, as your family budget allows, things that are more expensive if you need it. And so it really can apply to families on low income to high income, all the way in between, as well as families from every political side we have, from far right to far left and liberal and everywhere in between, from special needs kids to highly gifted advanced kids. Like,
Yeah.
we try to say what's our typical student doesn't exist. There's no such
Right.
thing. And that whole chapter of the book is there's no such thing as an average kid. Every
Right.
child is different and has different needs. And so from whatever level you're on there, something can work as you embrace a mindset to just tap into it all.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes total sense. It reminds me of sort of that jagged profile work, is that every kid is, the kids are growing, but they're growing in jagged ways. We're
Yes.
neurodiverse. Every one of us has a different brain than everybody else, and it feels like to me that there's some sense of, you know, parents should always be asking the question is my child thriving in the situation they're in? And if they're not, then I think what I'm hearing from you is that there's a lot of options, and open
Correct.
ed isn't an option for some students. And then there's a lot of other options, but don't
Correct.
feel that you're boxed into a situation. I think that's one of the things you've really blown wide open is this idea that there are opportunities, and there are more and more opportunities. And if our child is not engaged, not thriving, not learning, then we need to figure out what that next step is. And there's some small steps that you've articulated that the parents can start to think about, starting with no cost up to, what are the opportunities that cost a little bit of money. So as we close here, I want to ask the question I'm sure everybody else has asked you is like, what's AI going to do to this model? How are you thinking about it strategically? Or are you saying, no, we got a model that works without it? What's your thought there?
Couple of things here. First, AI is actually driving demand in our program because the fear that the promise of a standardized curriculum with a standardized diploma, go to a standardized college, get a standard job,
Yeah.
that promise is gone. Like the AI fear of what it will disrupt in the future has made people step back and say, if that linear path is no longer a secure and verified promise, I need to step back and say, okay, what is learning? What does my child need to learn? And AI has blown that so wide open that it's caused more and more families to say, okay, if that standard path might not serve in the future, what will? And that's what we love is parents just asking that question. So at a macro level, AI is driving interest in open
Yeah.
education more than I could ever imagine. At a tactical level, AI is also becoming a resource that families can tap into amongst everything else available to help design, questions or assessments or curriculum ideas or, unit lessons that they want to do on a topic that their kid's interested in. So it unlocks, the old box of, curriculum designers or teachers or assessment builders. Like it's an asset to families like it's never been available before. And then kind of go back to your very first question around, I learned a ton when I was making movies as a kid. AI is a creator. Like you can
Right.
use it
Right.
to develop movies, clips, podcasts, audios, music. It creates so many things. And then the creativity of humans comes in as you connect the dots on all those tools. And that's where I see it super interesting is it just creates so many assets for kids to plug and play to make something unique and interesting, entertaining, and demonstrates what they've learned. And that process is what we all want kids to go through. That's the process of learning.
It's a super exciting time. I think this idea of co-work and co-design with AI agents and partners is really interesting. Is how do we allow those things to do that technology to do what it does best, which is, surveying a vast amount of material and knowledge, and then allow us to continue to create and work towards solving big problems and big challenges and things that are of interest to us. So
Real quick,
yeah.
which is in Sunday dinner at the Bowmans is often around technology and education, right? And so one Sunday, our daughter-in-law said something like, with social media over the past 20 years, we've loaded world's problems onto teenagers' shoulders. Like they weren't, we shouldn't have done, like that's one of the downsides of bringing social media to every kid is that we're bringing the problems of the world, whereas it used to just be the problems of the community, right? And so they were a little more bearable, right, than carrying the whole world's problems. And then she pointed out where with all this fake, AI can create such fake impersonations of everything from news to movies to whatever that we won't know what's real. And
Yeah.
she made this point, maybe that will turn us all back to our communities again.
I love it. I love it.
I was, oh, that is a promise that if AI becomes just too much, you can't tell what's real, it's too weird all over the world. Let's just turn back to our neighborhoods and communities and solve problems and make our lives a better place from where we live. And I thought
Yeah.
that was a beautiful vision of where AI could go.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly singing my song. We've been thinking a lot about that, and that's one of my core hypotheses: is that ultimately connection will become the most important thing, and it'll be connection between even what we're doing right here, may be hard to detect if you're an AI or now I'm an AI within 5 years. I think that's going to be really difficult. So it is going to be human to human connection in person, talking about what are things we can do to make our community better. What's the
Yes.
common good in our place? And that's manageable. And I do think that that might be a positive side of AI, because the rest we may not actually know is true. And more content out there is being produced by AI. Matt, super excited to hear about what you're doing. Love the journey you've been on and the ability to really allow students and families to choose things that they think will be most engaging and most appropriate for their students while staying inside the public system. A couple conclusions on my end, just some nuggets of wisdom that I thought you shared was really just don't get caught up in labels for students. That I'm a public school student, or I'm a private school, or a public charter, or a magnet. Is really, we should be thinking about, I'm a student who's a learner, and that learning can happen anywhere. Second thing is, don't exclude public ed from this process. And the sort of the world of media wants us to choose sides. And I think you're making a very distinct decision about, no, you don't have to choose sides. You can do this in the public sector, the private sector. Open ed is for everybody. Personalized is truly possible. Like this idea that we've been chasing this in classrooms and schools and adding technology, but you're really taking it down to, hey, let's build our own thing. And if we can build our own thing and it further engages and allows our students to thrive, that's pretty amazing. And then I love the reflection questions that you ask parents to think about, and families and students, is what is learning? And in the face of massive disruption with AI and other big disruptions, is what will the future look like, and how do we best set up our young people and our children for that? So thanks, Matt. Appreciate all the thoughts. And I recommend anybody who's interested in this world to contact Matt or pick up his book and give it a read. It's a really good one to give a different sense of what the world could be in learning. So thanks.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.